Hey everyone, welcome. So we decided to record. We were just kind of riffing, and we decided that we needed to record some of this. So, Sinead, take it away. Let's kick it off with your weekend.
Yeah, appreciate it. Had a really interesting weekend with some friends that we went out to dinner with, and the two couples are members of the Baha'i faith, and my wife and I have met and socialized with folks from the Baha'i faith in the past, and find them very fascinating. I think one common thread is there's a lot of thought and depth of dialogue that occurs about, within the followers of the Baha'i faith about what it means to lead a good life, to be a good person, human rights, ensuring everybody gets to live a life with dignity and meaning and purpose. And so we always have great conversations whenever I hang out with folks that belong to the faith. And, this dinner was no different. We ended up touching on so many different topics, from Charlie Kirk to AOC to what's his name, the guy running for mayor of New York City, Donnie, thank you, and capitalism and competition and religion and like just social constructs of unwritten rules of how we all coexist together. So a whole smorgasbord of topics that we covered. And I'll say that there is no shortage of ways in which we can all agree to live together, to coexist. And it's really amazing, like over the years that we've all lived throughout history, and you look back and how many wars were related to religion and territory. And now, when we have so many different ideologies to choose from, we still find ourselves with history repeating itself yet again. Us not finding yet a perfect structure or construct that reduces violence, that reduces human suffering and rage and conflict. And I don't know, I believe that democracy was the closest construct that we had, because it does allow for what I like. It allows for balance. Like, I feel like that's the most beautiful part of democracy. Anytime you and I have a debate, or even if you were to debate people with different ideologies, at the end, truth is such an elusive concept and such an elusive endpoint that you need balance. And I feel like that's the beautiful thing about democracy. And that's why I'm so passionate about democracy. And a lot of that came up at our over our dinner. And we had a conversation about competition, and like, should there be competition, and how ruthless competition can be, and what it brings out in us as humans. I just think that that's something that's impossible to dilute or to remove or to eliminate, that humans will always be competitive. And I think that's a good thing if we use it in constructive ways, like what I think a
Yeah,
democratic process would allow. We get to some really cool outcomes. So anyway, that
yeah,
was
that's a great point, and I think it's just human nature, right? I don't think you can fully get away from that, but I think you can put it in strong guardrails on it because I think most people would agree that rampant capitalism is not a great thing. So yeah, I mean, you put some guardrails around it, but yeah, you have to, harness it, like you said, and use it in constructive ways because it is the engine for human creativity and for innovation. And, all the advancements we've made have been due to capitalism to a certain extent. So yeah, I don't think you can just shut that off in human beings.
What do you think of, like, some of the reasons that we are in the situation that we're in? I mean, why in this go of democracy, which in our lifetimes has really, I think, probably worked so well that we took it for granted, and maybe that's the answer. But I'm curious on your thoughts of, like, why have our democratic norms of how we treat each other with dignity, respect, and debate and free speech, and not just and no political violence. I mean, at least in, like, since you and I have been born, I mean, it's been pretty limited, except for recently.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you find instances of political violence going back to the civil rights era, right? But yeah, I think you're right. In our lifetime, it hasn't. It's been pretty quiet, and I think it is something we probably take for granted. I mean, honestly, it's going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but I think it all goes back to social media, right? I mean, with the if you go back, the internet became more widespread starting in the late '90s, right? Mid to late '90s. Smartphones took off in mid to late 2000s. social media really, I mean, Facebook came out in what, 2005, 4 or 5, something like that, but then really became prevalent with smartphones. I think you can, there's a direct line between that and uh, the situation we find ourselves in. It's a lot easier to be behind a screen and say whatever you want when you don't see the other person as a human being than it is to look someone in the eye face to face and say the same thing. You can't, you have to acknowledge someone's humanity when you're in their presence, when you're looking at someone face to face that you don't have to do. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people have grown up in this environment where it's too easy to just say whatever you want online. And those are the things get unfortunately get amplified. And our media environment hasn't helped that in any way, right? Because I mean, so much of the clickbaity kind of media that exists online is just rehashing what's on social media. Like, they'll just collect what the tweets they see, or even to a certain extent, I think a lot of politicians do the same thing. I think they see social media as reality, and that just makes everything worse. So I think, uh, and this reminds me of, I sent you a link earlier today about with a debate between Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates, and it was really interesting because that led me to another debate between Ezra Klein and Ben Shapiro. And obviously, the Coates and Klein one is a lot more kind of the left, kind of reckoning with the situation we're in and how we got here and what the left can do better. But the one with Klein and Shapiro is really interesting because, I think both Klein and Shapiro can be guilty sometimes of, falling victim to the whole clickbaity thing. But this was like a long form debate. I think it was almost 2 hours. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched a good portion of it. And it was just two people who, don't agree with everything that the other believes, but just having a civil conversation. And you see, even though they don't agree on certain points, you can see where they're coming from because they're explaining it in a way that's not about scoring political points or debate tactics or anything like that. It's just two people really grappling with actual real life issues and explaining where they come from. And I just feel like we need so much more of that in the world today.
I mean, maybe you hit on something there. Like the antidote to the, let's say, social media explosion, virus, disease is long form content and debate like podcasts. And if we as humans, let's say, get more productive with AI and can focus more on the importance of civics and building institutions that allow us to live with civility, human dignity, and not focus so much on ideology, but rather on how we coexist with each other and have these necessary discussions and not just focus on dopamine hits. It's like we've just gotten fat, dumb, happy, stupid, like, and short term focused, like the short term focus that has like just social media continues to put fuel on the fire of, oh, I just need to hear what you need to say in 140 characters. And you have to keep me entertained with whatever you can think of in 140 characters. Otherwise, I'm going to go over here. Um, it's all connected, right? It is connected, of course, to capitalism, and it's connected to how people, you know, build purpose in their life and ease and like just that feeling of just constantly eating dessert. And I don't know. For us, I think you and I love talking long form. We love having these types of conversations. It's not for
Right.
everyone, right? I don't think everybody enjoys this type of debate and content. And if you're getting together watching a football game, people don't want to sit around and have a philosophical conversation about, capitalism and the guardrails that we need to put in it for it to be successful and how do we save our democracy. Like it's just not, it's a heavy topic that you and I just enjoy geeking out over, and many others do, but not the majority of the population. So if we have podcasts that become more relatable, that talk about the nuance of decisions, that talk about the nuance of a policy that we want to see implemented to allow us to live as better Americans. Maybe this is the antidote to dopamine hit that, okay, you know what? Like, this has to be interesting. It has to captivate not just people that like to geek out like you and I do, doesn't have to maybe it has to appeal to others that are just focused on sports, and you weave a little bit of this into it. And you have to find crossover ways in which you can get into the nuances and the importance of what's happening in the world around us and have a civil discourse of what we want. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the keys is, us talking about what we want.
Yeah. So I agree with that. I think civil discourse, I think we need a lot more of it, right? Here's something I struggle with that I'd love to get your opinion on. So, yeah, we have all this long form content now. We have, I don't know how many thousands of podcasts out there, people talking, right?
Sure.
And I struggle with whether or not that's a good thing. And hear me out. So you have people kind of, there's this argument that, you know, podcast hosts will have on, whoever they can get pretty much, right? And there's this idea that, you platform, quote unquote platform people who could spread misinformation or who the host may not push back on enough and whether or not that's harmful. And, we saw this with Joe Rogan, right? Where supposedly he platformed, I mean, you could argue one way or the other, right? But, a lot of people say he platformed people who are anti vax, who are, kind of fringe scientific figures, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, yeah, yeah, I'm all for free speech, right? But where do we kind of draw the line? And is there a line? Or maybe there shouldn't be. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe we should let everyone just say whatever they want and just, let the, what's the saying? Sunlight's the best disinfectant. But there's also propaganda. And, I think you could potentially see it cross over into that territory at a certain point. So I really struggle with this because I truly believe in free speech. I think everyone should be able to say whatever they want to an extent, obviously, without harming people, inciting violence, all that. You right? But is there a line? Like, should we draw a line somewhere?
I mean, I think the line is very much what we stay in the Constitution. I'm a same with you. Like, absolutely free speech as long as it is not to incite violence or harm others. To me, that's the line. And if your team is losing in the debate, then you can't censor them. If people are interested in that content because it feels like dessert and it tastes like dessert and everybody just wants to eat dessert, I don't think you can just say like, "Hey, you know what? We should ban all desserts. Like no more chocolate cake for anybody." Like it doesn't work that way. That has so many other negative connotations to it. Negative implications to it that we will not get to optimal outcomes and we will get more extreme views if you try to censor free speech, from my perspective. Now, should we have a debate on what it means to be journalistic? Should we tune out of propaganda? Should we have enough self control to demand journalistic integrity of the content that we consume? Absolutely. And we used to, and we've gone away from that. And I think some of that is the complexity of our systems. I think some of it is faith and hope of society and civilization, of upward mobility, and a belief that they're working and living and existing in a system that they can be successful in. And when that breaks, I think people don't trust anything or anyone. And then there's no experts. Then there is nobody that is doing the deep research and the deep thinking to have an opinion that is informed. And it takes more work and we have to rebuild and we have to come back to it. Yeah. So all I was saying is that, yes, absolutely, free speech is important and we have to be careful about censorship and we have to have an educated society. I mean, that's really what it comes
Yeah,
down to, man. I
I think
mean, I know we've probably said this on a
that's
couple
really
of other
critical.
pods, but like in the absence of us, yeah, you have to. And in the absence of us having a common language with which we can all communicate and talk to each other, it's very hard to trust experts and to trust that people that are in the position of making power have our best interest at heart versus their own self-interests. And it's easy to propose easy solutions. Tear it all down, kill them all off, rebuild the whole thing from the ground up. It's harder to say Well, that's impossible. We have to do better. We have to work harder and we have to think smarter and we have to think long term about how we actually fix the mess that we're in now. And that starts with conversations like this because I mean, listen, even if you were to be a proponent of, universal healthcare, we know our healthcare system is broken and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to fix it. But just saying we're going to move to universal healthcare, Medicare expansion, and think that all of our healthcare problems are cured, it's foolish. You'd have issues with jobs, you'd have issues with quality of care, you'd have issues with healthcare systems being overrun potentially by volume of visits. There are so many other implications of those types of policies that instead of focusing on like power and control and politics of who gets to make these decisions, we just need to go back to having conversations about what decision do we want made and rebuilding our public discussion to focus on issues and not anger, hate, rage, attention, dopamine hits, and eating a bunch of chocolate cake.
Yeah, that's so true. I wonder though, is it the type of content or type of discussion that happens that should dictate how we talk about it? So I was curious, thinking back to the whole Ezra Klein and Ben Shapiro discussion, it was a lot of talk, like very philosophical, high level discussions about how the government should behave, like how we should make policy, right? I think the problem happens is when you get into the details, right? Like especially around something like healthcare, right? Where there's statistics, there's science, there's the details, like the real work that you have to do to make this, make something happen. I feel like that's when you can get into trouble because people can throw out bullshit stats, people can throw out, pseudoscience, and how well can a podcaster who maybe isn't journalistically trained push back on that, right? So while yes, I like the fact that we're moving away from these traditional, archaic media institutions, there is a certain advantage to having journalistic kind of rigor around how we talk about these things, right? And I don't know that podcasts have caught up to that. So, yes, theoretically, I like open discussion, open, honest discussion. But I think there is some real value in the kind of rigor that comes with journalism, traditional journalism.
Sure. I mean, even when television first started and radio first started, there was nothing really stopping anybody from being a propagandist, from being a, person that goes into a public forum and screams fire just to get attention. I mean, it could have all existed, but we as a society decided that we're not going to pay attention to that. It's nonsense. It's a snake oil salesman. That's not real information. I'm not going to waste my time listening to this guy spewing toxic shit. Like I have higher standards than that. And that's what journalism used to be. And we have to get back to that. Honestly. I mean, I don't know. I feel weird like repeating myself, but like, we can't just listen to the guy in the back of a classroom explain why organic chemistry is stupid and we don't need to study it. And then just listen to him and say, well, here's what you really need to know about, medicines and how the science around us works and all these maybe there are natural cures and maybe there is some truth to what this kid in the back of the classroom has to say. But he's going to have a higher burden of proof for me to be convinced of anything that he says than somebody that has a PhD in organic chemistry and is doing research to discover drugs. Even if it's for a for-profit institution, I'm going to believe their views of science and the way a medication is supposed to work and why this particular medication could treat this given disease because they've earned that respect from me. And we have to go back to that. We have to have higher standards. And I don't know, maybe it's overly simplified to say we have to eat our vegetables instead of our dessert. But I think that's what it is. Like if you're out there just seeking dessert all the time because you want a dopamine hit or you want somebody to validate your feelings and don't want to question or challenge your ideology, we're never going to change. You have to be willing to listen and concede that you are subscribing to an ideology and question everything about the ideology, to plug our podcast a little.
right? Um, yeah, man. I think that's a good message to get out there. I think we should all be more discerning about how we consume our content, but also, a challenge to podcast hosts out there, like be better, like don't we all have our biases, obviously, right? But I think you need to push back on people and, I mean, call it Socratic questioning or whatever. Like you need to really get to the root of issues and question them and pressure test them and like make people defend their position so that you can get to the truth of it. Don't just let people spew whatever they want and just take it as, okay, fine, and then move on. Like you really need to pressure test this stuff.
It goes back to what you said earlier about, are these about capitalism, and if these podcast hosts are focused on money and capitalism and maybe power, maybe influence for capitalistic gains, then it's not journalism, right? Their goal is not to give two sides of an interesting debate and allow allow their audience to make a decision on which way they lean. It is to form opinions. It is to influence thought. It is to drive an agenda, and the agenda is for their own personal gain. So I guess I'll flip it back to you. I mean, maybe it was a question that you asked earlier, but I mean, I love that you called out other podcast hosts. I think maybe that is maybe one of the answers to the question that I was going to ask, but how do we take back journalism? Is it calling out folks that are entertainers as entertainers, and in our own social circles when we have conversations, pointing our friends, family to journalism sites? I remember you and I, one of our first podcasts, we featured websites that we felt were independent and were trying to bring journalism back. Hasn't taken off much. I mean, we're still very tribal and all siloed in our own news, and very dependent on the algorithms. Not only dependent, but like, I don't know, almost slaves to the algorithm.
Yeah,
And how do we
yeah,
break
I
that?
think that's I don't know. It takes me back to this discussion that brought up between Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates, and there was a really interesting topic that Ezra Klein brought up is that the left doesn't talk enough to the other side, and there's this idea that you're betraying your side if you talk to someone on the opposite, which I think is complete bullshit, right? Like we should be talking more to each other. And if I think if more people see these civil discussions between people of different political stripes, we'll all be better off because it's like, you know, it's easy to demonize the other side when they're not there. But when you see two people having a discussion, like a true, honest discussion and debate, even if you don't agree with that person, it humanizes that person. It humanizes a whole side. Whereas I think it's too easy on social media and even some traditional media to paint a whole side. I saw a lot of the response to the Charlie Kirk shooting was not that, hey, this is a crazy person with a gun who just did something crazy because it's an individual who did this. No, the left was trying to paint it as, hey, this is a right wing guy. He's from a right wing family. And so it's a MAGA problem. And the right wing was saying, no, he has a trans boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it was, and he's a left wing guy. So the response was an immediate, no, it's their fault, not, hey, let's really look at what the issue is. It was too easy for everyone to try to score political points. And you could argue this happens anytime there's a school shooting or something, right? Is everyone jumps to score political points rather than having a real honest discussion about what the issue is and how we can resolve it. I don't know what the answer is, but I think you're right. I think we're in a better position now than we've ever been because we have free media. You can start a YouTube channel, you can start a podcast and reach millions of people almost immediately. And you can, you can not counter, but like really match what a traditional media publication can do, just on your own.
All right.
I think that's good. It can be good or bad, but no, go ahead.
Here's the skeptic in me, because you were saying it, and I had this thought pop into my head about podcasts, and it kind of contradicts both of our points about some optimism about podcasts resulting in long form, which is if the way in which all of us consume information is driven through a AI tool or a search engine, um, and those algorithms are also aware of our preferences and where we search out, like would we only continue to stay in our echo chamber? Will the algorithm allow us to go outside of that echo chamber that the algorithm is, pushing everybody towards with content? So I don't know. I have one quick story for you. I don't know, maybe it's not quick, but you were making the point of Ezra Klein saying that we need to talk to liberals, need to talk to conservatives more, that, Trump supporters need to be spoken to. And I was talking to one of my friends who's not woke, but I think he consumes a lot of content online because he's really well read, really well informed, knows a lot about what's happening in the world, but he's so freaking angry. And he hates anybody that voted for Trump. And I've given him countless examples of, like, dude, I have family members that voted for Trump because they thought he was going to help their taxes. He's like, well, fuck them. And don't they regret it now? And like, just so angry about it. And I'm like, dude, like, you need to chill out and talk to them. He's like, no, this is over. There is no more talking. They don't want to talk. They want a civil war. This is the Third Reich. It's here. Like the takeover of the Nazis is happening. Like they're racist, white agenda, like get rid of all immigrant, like the whole talk track that we all hear. He is in. And I refuse to let him go there. Like for me to go there, like I'm like, no, like I talk to Republicans. I have friends that are Republicans. We disagree politically, but we play basketball together. We watch football together. We go on road trips together. We go on vacations together. We chat. We talk about how do we fix this? And it's some of the most interesting conversations because I learn something every time I talk to them. Every time. And which is why I go back to the topic of democracy and that, like, if you're so angry about the other side, you have to look in the mirror about why you're so angry because you're falling victim to the same thing that you're accusing the other side of. How can they belong to this cult? Well, you're in a cult, dude. Why are you so angry? Why are you refusing to talk to the other side? It's a binary game. You don't know that their ideology is the extreme ideology of that side. Just like they don't know that your ideology is the extreme side of the liberal and Democratic Party. The only way to break through is to talk.
Yeah, so true, and it's so easy to paint a whole side, right? Like I said, like to demonize a whole side, but you don't know what the individual motivations are. Everyone, does things for different reasons. They, a whole host of reasons. Their background, things they personal experiences. So you can't, you can't, yeah, you can't just paint people with such a broad brush. I mean, we know from history that that leads to bad things happening, right?
And
Uh,
it's boring.
yeah,
Honestly, it's boring. Like it really is to just paint somebody with a broad brush. Be curious.
yeah.
Understand
Yeah, it
why.
reminds me actually it reminds me of this, there's a YouTube channel called More Perfect Union. It's this guy who's a journalist, and, I think he's made some pretty interesting videos in the past that I've seen, but, in this particular one, he was, following around Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has been doing his, Fight Oligarchy tour, I think, and just going around and doing rallies in different places, and in this particular one, he was in West Virginia. He was doing a whole bunch of, rallies in West Virginia, and, we know that at least in the past few elections, I'd say, it's gone it went from very blue to very red, in a very short amount of time, you know, relatively short amount of time, per 20, 30 years, something like that. Uh, and it was interesting because Bernie was giving these rallies, but then he also followed him to, like, have lunch with a whole bunch of, Trump voters at, like, a local diner or something like that. And, they all had, like, a very civil discussion talking about issues, and it was so striking because the one of the ladies was like, "They paint you as some evil socialist, but you're just a regular guy." And it really struck me that it's this social media going back to the same thing, the social media, this media environment, that it's so easy to demonize the other side. And when you look at, people who don't really follow politics, they're just getting snippets and they're getting it from Facebook. And I don't know, maybe half of those are bots, like Russian bots or who knows what, right? Like, how do you know any of that content is real? And unfortunately, people are not well informed. A lot of people are not well informed, so they're just getting these snippets of information and forming their opinions on it. And I don't know how to fight against that because, yeah, you could put out all the content, long form content you want, but is it going to reach people like that who aren't politically involved or politically motivated to be involved? Like they're just getting, they're just and then no, I'm not criticizing them. People are just try a lot of people just trying to make ends meet and put food on the table. They don't necessarily have time to go and listen to podcasts and like we do, right? So yeah, I don't blame people like that, but yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how we reach people like that.
So it was, I guess, almost inevitable that when these for-profit companies began the creation of their products, that we would end up in the current situation. If you were, I guess, a student of history, maybe you could have predicted this. Maybe folks warned us about this. I'm sure there were people that predicted this is where we were going to end up much earlier than you and I starting this podcast, like the unintended consequences of the amplification of extreme views. I just wonder what's the right balance between an organic grassroots movement to fix this and regulation? Because both, do we need both? How much of both do we need? I'm confident that a grassroots movement will change it, but I think it's a hell of a long road to hoe. Maybe a generation, maybe more, before we come to grips with like our kids growing up that their source of news is from social media. Like they don't have, you don't watch CNN or Fox, or they don't have a Tom Brokaw or Peter Jennings or Barbara Walters or whatever, pick your journalist that you liked. They have influencers, especially teen boys. They have Joe Rogan. And so when they think of, well, or when we think of like how opinions are formed and like values are created for individuals. Of course, parents have, I think, the greatest influence depending on your relationship with your kids. But as they go out into the real world, it's other influences that drive their decisions and their values. And I, you asked the question about free speech, and I agree free speech should not be regulated. But I would not be opposed to there being some type of identification of entertainment and news, and news being unbiased, and dissemination of facts that lead to the creation of opinions and interesting discourse off of information as opposed to opinions.
Yeah, it's such a tough. How do you define that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's the challenge. And I think, a lot of these cable news networks have gotten away with a lot because first, they're not regulated by the FCC, and second, because they can label it as opinion and get away with doing whatever they want pretty much, right? But the problem is a lot of people take it as news, as fact. But in court cases, when, they're really pressed to it, that they'll say their opinion shows, not news
Right.
shows.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I agree. I think that could be a potential solution, but I don't know how we get that done, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is within our control is you got to go grassroots, got to have conversations, get involved in your local town, get involved in your civics and rebuild it. I don't know. I can't stop thinking about how much for granted immigrants take the democratic institutions that really truly did make America great, the greatest superpower in the world. It was because there was morality, ethics, a love of all citizens, and that reduced the need for us to have policies on everything because there was self-governance of, yeah, we probably shouldn't do trials on humans of this medication because that's really awful if there's side effects of this medication. Like maybe we should try it on animals first. And then we move the goalposts and all of that, and life becomes complicated. And Capitalism changes people's morality, and then you correct that with regulations, and then regulations are always lagging. There's always somebody ahead of it, and you have these, you know, like movements that are so harmful. Tobacco industry comes to mind, Purdue Pharma, and opioid addiction comes to mind, and those seem almost inevitable. And maybe the biggest one, maybe that's what social media is in a lifetime that you didn't, like, we kind of all knew that it was harmful, but now we're at this reckoning of like I will not let my daughter be on any social media platforms. Like, period. I made the mistake with both my boys because I felt societal pressure for it, but like, no, like she's not getting a phone with social media or anything until 8th grade. That's kind of the line that we drew in the sand. I mean, the parallels between what social media does and cigarettes and addictive substances is, I think, very true and very real. And I think we have to have more honest conversations about it if we're going to defeat it.
Yeah, I think that, the silver lining here is that it's still early, and I think we are finally starting to see a kind of acceptance that, yeah, it is bad by a larger swath of the public, right? It's not I think people see the writing on the wall, and I think there's this trend for no phones in schools, and, you know, maybe pulling back from social media. So I'm hoping the newer generations see that, and, there's a whole, trend also with drinking, right? Where Gen Z the levels of drinking in Gen Z are just, you know, minuscule compared to previous
That's because
generations.
they're all getting high because weed's legal now. Just kidding. Sorry.
No, 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 it's so true, but anyway, but yeah, so, I think they're seeing there's a lot more data now on how harmful drinking is long term, and I think the other thing is I think in contrast to that, I think people are it's less sociable to drink together, right? And I think people are less sociable, so good and bad, right? Like, people are not getting together at the bar and having conversations, people are getting high by themselves. So, that's probably not a great thing, but yeah, I mean, overall, less drinking in society is probably a good thing, for our health overall, long term. So maybe people will see the same thing with social media and start pulling back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of a bubble we're in relative to the rest of the country. We are. I mean, we definitely are in a bubble. I mean, I we just are. Socioeconomic status, our geography in the world, the professions that we are in, it's definitely different than what I think the average American feels. We don't have as strong of a pulse on it. But I do feel that we are having more honest conversations now than we have in maybe the whole, like, Trump administration. So whatever, 2015, 2016, right? Since he first came onto the stage. It's hard to believe it's fucking 10 years. Like, Jesus Christ. But I hope this leads to some more discourse of good, rich, productive conversations that, we don't retreat to our corners and, like, just allow violence to occur around us. That we speak up, we tell the other side we love them, we ask them why they are not speaking out against brown people being randomly taken away, what seems like it. That we're not speaking out when the president says things like, I hate the other side. Like, hmm, that's like, no, you're the president. Like, you need the other side. We need Democrats and Republicans both for there to be a healthy democracy. For God's sakes, we need more parties than less
Yeah.
parties. And we need to ask them, like, why is that okay? Is the other side that scary? And if the other side is that scary that you're willing to compromise what is being spewed by your party, how do we change that? How do we change that? Because if if we both see the boogeyman on each other's side, we're never going to speak to each other. And I guarantee you, there are like, I can rattle off three, four, maybe five bipartisan issues, right? Number one, term limits on senators. Most people agree that we need term limits on our senators.
Yeah, and throw in term limits for Supreme Court justices too.
Yeah, maybe that one too. Fine. Like, okay, great. Both of those. Third one. So you got those two. Third one is repeal of Citizens United. Get the money out of politics. Don't let corporations fund politicians through back channels and super PACs. Like, get rid of it. Get rid of it. No average American wants there to be super PACs. I work for corporate America. I don't want there to be super PACs. I want the democratic process to put policies in place that keep American citizens healthy, that support a thriving middle class. That's what I want. That's what we should all want. And allowing corporate assets to influence and promote politicians that drive their agenda is anti-democratic. And we should be against it, and we need to find politics. So there you go. Those are issues that I think unite all of us, that we should all focus on, and then we can talk about abortion and gun rights and the environment and all of those. Although I don't think the environment should be controversial, but anyhow, we'll leave that one be. Though the other three, I think 80% of Americans all agree that we should.
Yeah, no, I'll throw another one, ranked choice voting.
Mm.
Let's get more viewpoints in here, right? Like, let's not it's too limiting, 2 parties, right? Like, um, I don't think anyone agrees with everything that their party stands for necessarily. Like, make politicians build coalitions, like, make them listen to other viewpoints. Let's get more viewpoints on the national stage. Like, this whole two-party system just you can't create these 2 monoliths and expect everyone to fit neatly into one of these 2 things, like, it just doesn't work.
No, I agree. I agree. Okay, I got one for you. What, like, we used to sort of think that, or there used to be this premise that if you had to be one of the smartest people, high IQ, people in the world to be the president of the United States. And we focus so much on relatability, more so like you want the president to be relatable as opposed to like, nah, dude, like I don't want the CEO of a company to be relatable. Who the hell is like who relates to the CEO of any company that they work for? No
Right.
one. It's a lonely job. They are lonely people by design. If you sign up to be a CEO, you sign up to be lonely, not relatable, and a little weird. Like, just is. And what happened to that being the same case with the president of the United States? I mean, I guess that's populism, man. But I mean, gosh, I really I would like there to be people that are like Rhodes scholars, that have high IQs, that have just can see patterns and see the implications of decisions, and that are just like way smarter than the average person, like in another elite level of intelligence, that has chosen to dedicate their lives truly to public service, not a corporation, not a company, that they truly believe that their purpose in life is public service.
Yeah. Well, my friend, I think you've just made the case for an AI president,
There we go,
and
baby.
we should end it there.
AI president. Oh my god. 2028? Holy shit.
Right?
All right, brother.
22. Alright, good catching up. It's important stuff. Let's keep talking about it. I think, more we talk about it, the hopefully it'll infiltrate out there and, start affecting people.
All right, here's an invitation, man. If you are of a differing opinion, if you represent somebody that believes in the MAGA movement, hit us up, send us a note. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to have you on the pod and understand what attracted you to the party, what you hope to see as a member of that party, and what's your image of America 5 years from now that you're hopeful that we can see, and help us understand that and why you think the current platform is going to be the right way to get there. Love to talk about that. Love to understand that. So hit us up.
Yeah, 100%. Hit us up for sure. Alright, catch you next time.
That's the pod. See you, man.
See ya.